The crowded Atlanta courtroom falls silent as 7-year-old Jamal Washington rises from his seat, his small finger pointing directly at Detective Wade McAllister. "That's him. He shot my mama while she was holding me," Jamal announces, his voice unwavering despite tears streaming down his face. The judge's gavel crashes down as chaos erupts, but Jamal's eyes never leave McAllister's suddenly pale face. Nobody believes a black child could bring down Oakwood County's most decorated officer, but nobody knows the evidence hidden in Jamal's dinosaur backpack. Will this brave boy's testimony be enough to overcome a system designed to silence him? Before we dive into this powerful story of courage and justice, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe every voice deserves to be heard in the fight for justice, hit that like button and subscribe, because tomorrow's special episode reveals how one small action can change an entire community's future. The evening of March 15th began like any other for Letitia Washington and her son Jamal. The 35-year-old community nurse had just finished her shift at Oakwood Medical Center and picked up Jamal from his after-school program. They were heading home to their modest 2-bedroom apartment in Pinewood, a predominantly black neighborhood on Atlanta's south side. Letitia was tired, but smiling as Jamal chatted about his science project on dinosaurs. She had worked double shifts all week to afford the special dinosaur encyclopedia he wanted, tucked safely in his backpack. Neither knew their lives would shatter within the hour. Detective Wade McAllister patrolled Pinewood that night in his unmarked police cruiser. The 42-year-old white officer had earned commendations for drug busts in the area, though community members often complained about his aggressive tactics and racial profiling. McAllister had been particularly active in Pinewood since Oakwood Ventures announced its neighborhood revitalization project, which many residents feared was just coded language for gentrification. The red and blue lights flashed in Letitia's rearview mirror just 3 blocks from home. She sighed, pulling over carefully. "Stay quiet, baby," she told Jamal. "Mama will handle this." She placed both hands visibly on the steering wheel, just as she had taught Jamal to do if ever stopped by police. McAllister approached, flashlight beam striking directly into her eyes. "License and registration," he demanded without explanation. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" Letitia asked politely. "Broken taillight," McAllister replied curtly. Though both her taillights functioned perfectly, Letitia nodded calmly. "I'm going to reach for my purse to get my license." She narrated her movements clearly, aware of how quickly these situations could escalate for black drivers. As she reached slowly for her purse, she also discreetly pressed record on her phone, a habit developed after several Pinewood residents reported harassment during traffic stops. "What are you reaching for?" McAllister suddenly shouted, his hand moving to his weapon. "Just my ID, sir," Letitia responded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My wallet is in my purse. Show me your hands, now." McAllister drew his gun, aiming directly at Letitia. "Officer, please," Letitia pleaded, raising her hands while holding her open wallet. "My 7-year-old son is in the car." McAllister glanced at Jamal in the back seat, then back at Letitia. "You people need to learn to comply immediately," he growled. "I am complying," Letitia said, her doctor's ID clearly visible. "I'm a nurse at Oakwood Medical. Here's my license." Something shifted in McAllister's expression when he saw where she worked. "Oakwood, huh? You know anything about those community meetings, the ones trying to block the new development?" Letitia stiffened. She had indeed been organizing residents against Oakwood Ventures' predatory practices, documenting how police increased patrols and arrests in areas the company targeted for acquisition. Before she could respond, McAllister spotted her phone recording the encounter. "You recording me?" he snarled. "Hand that over." "I have the right to record," Letitia stated calmly, though her hands trembled slightly, "for both our protection." What happened next occurred in mere seconds, but would replay endlessly in Jamal's nightmares. McAllister reached through the window, attempting to grab the phone. Letitia instinctively pulled back. 3 gunshots exploded in the small space of the car. Letitia slumped forward, blood pooling on her white nurse's uniform. "Mama!" Jamal screamed, unstrapping his seatbelt and lunging forward. McAllister stumbled backward, suddenly aware of what he'd done. He quickly composed himself and called dispatch. "Officer needs assistance. Suspect down. Attempted assault on an officer during traffic stop." Within minutes, police vehicles flooded the scene. McAllister pulled fellow officers aside, speaking urgently before anyone approached Letitia or Jamal. By the time paramedics arrived, Letitia Washington was pronounced dead at the scene. Throughout the chaos, a terrified Jamal had managed to grab his mother's still-recording phone and slip it into his dinosaur backpack. As officers separated Jamal from his mother's body, the boy went silent, his eyes vacant, traumatized by witnessing the unthinkable. One officer tried to take his backpack, but Jamal clutched it fiercely, refusing to let go even as they placed him in a social worker's car. By morning, the official police statement described the incident as a justified shooting in self-defense. According to the report, Letitia Washington had reached for an unknown object after behaving erratically, forcing Detective McAllister to make a split-second decision to protect himself. The department backed McAllister unequivocally, placing him on standard administrative leave while praising his record of service. Local news stations ran with the department's narrative, highlighting a decade-old misdemeanor possession charge on Letitia's record, though she had since earned her nursing degree and had no subsequent encounters with law enforcement. Her community activism went unmentioned in official reports. Jamal, meanwhile, was placed with his grandmother, Eloise Washington. The 67-year-old retired schoolteacher held her grandson tightly as he stared blankly at the wall, refusing to speak about what happened. Eloise knew the system well enough to doubt the official story, but proving what really happened seemed impossible against the word of a decorated police officer. All she had was a traumatized child and a community in mourning. As protests erupted across Pinewood, demanding justice for Letitia Washington, Detective McAllister remained confident he would face no consequences. The system had protected officers like him before, but he didn't know about the phone hidden in a child's dinosaur backpack, nor the quiet determination growing in Jamal's young heart to make sure everyone knew the truth about what happened to his mama. 3 weeks after Letitia's funeral, Eloise Washington sat in her 5th law office of the month, clutching her grandson's hand. Jamal hadn't spoken more than a few words since the shooting, but his nightmares woke them both nightly. The previous 4 attorneys had politely but firmly declined to take their case against Detective McAllister and the police department. One had been brutally honest. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Washington, but no one wins against Oakwood County Police, especially not with just a child's word against a decorated officer." The waiting room of Reynolds Legal Services was small but meticulously maintained. Framed degrees from Howard University and Columbia Law School hung beside community service awards. When Marcus Reynolds emerged from his office, Eloise was surprised by his youth. At 33, the black attorney had recently returned to Atlanta after building a promising career at a prestigious New York firm. "Mrs. Washington," Marcus greeted her warmly, kneeling to Jamal's eye level. "And you must be Jamal. Thank you both for coming in today." Inside his office, Eloise explained their situation, while Jamal silently studied the model Saturn on Marcus's desk. "I know my daughter," Eloise said firmly. "She would never threaten an officer. Letitia taught Jamal exactly what to do during traffic stops because she knew the dangers. But no one will listen to us." Marcus nodded, reviewing the police report. "These inconsistencies are troubling. The report claims your daughter became combative, but the autopsy shows she was shot while seated with her seatbelt still fastened, and no weapon was found, despite Officer McAllister's claim she reached for something threatening." "Will you help us?" Eloise asked, hope flickering for the first time in weeks. Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang. He excused himself to take the call in the hallway. Through the partially open door, Eloise overheard snippets. "Reynolds, Hyun-Yu back in town, so let me give you some advice. The Washington case is career suicide. McAllister has friends everywhere, including the judge's chambers. Walk away while you still have a practice." When Marcus returned, his expression was resolute. "Mrs. Washington, I should warn you that taking on the police department won't be easy. The system protects its own. My daughter deserves justice," Eloise replied simply. Marcus turned to Jamal, who continued examining the Saturn model. "What about you, Jamal? Space fan?" For the first time, Jamal looked directly at Marcus. "Mama was taking me to the observatory for my birthday next month. She said Saturn's rings are made of ice and rocks." "She was right," Marcus smiled gently. "I've been there. Maybe we could go sometime, you and your grandmother." Jamal didn't respond, but something shifted in his posture. Over the next few days, Marcus visited the Washingtons' home regularly, building trust with both Eloise and Jamal. He brought space books and sometimes just sat quietly with Jamal as the boy drew picture after picture of the night his mother died. During one visit, Marcus noticed Jamal clutching his dinosaur backpack protectively. "That's a cool T-Rex," Marcus commented. "What do you keep in there?" Jamal studied Marcus intently before whispering, "A secret. A really important secret." "I'm good with secrets," Marcus replied casually. "Sometimes the most important ones need a grown-up's help to keep safe." "They'll hurt Grandma if they know I have it," Jamal whispered. Marcus's expression remained calm, though his heart raced. "Jamal, I promise you, I won't let anyone hurt your grandmother or you. Whatever you're keeping safe, I can help." After a long moment, Jamal unzipped his backpack and pulled out a phone in a purple case. "It's Mama's. She was recording when the policeman shot her. I took it before they could find it." Marcus carefully took the phone, his hands trembling slightly, as he unlocked the screen and found the video file. What he saw confirmed his worst fears and greatest hopes. Clear, unambiguous evidence of Detective McAllister shooting Letitia Washington without provocation while she held only her ID. The video captured everything, including McAllister's questions about her community organizing and his racial remarks before firing. "Jamal," Marcus said softly, "you've been incredibly brave keeping this safe. This is exactly what we need to get justice for your mama." For the first time since the shooting, Jamal's eyes filled with tears. "Can we make the bad policeman go to jail?" "We're going to try with everything we've got," Marcus promised. The following day, Marcus filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Detective McAllister and the Oakwood County Police Department, submitting the video as evidence. The community rallied around the case, with Pinewood residents organizing vigils and support groups for the Washington family. National civil rights organizations issued statements demanding accountability. For a brief moment, justice seemed possible. 3 days later, Marcus and the Washingtons arrived at the courthouse for the preliminary hearing, ready to present their evidence. But Judge Howard Brennan's ruling sent shockwaves through the courtroom. The video evidence submitted by the plaintiff is deemed inadmissible due to chain of custody concerns. There is no verification of when this recording was made or whether it has been altered. Marcus jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, the timestamp and geolocation data clearly authenticate the recording, and forensic analysis confirms it hasn't been modified." Judge Brennan peered over his glasses. "Mr. Reynolds, this court will not admit evidence that was concealed from law enforcement at a crime scene, then held by a minor for weeks without proper documentation. Motion to dismiss denied, but this video will not be considered in proceedings." As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Eloise shielded Jamal from the cameras while Marcus made a brief statement. "Today's ruling is disappointing, but not the end. We will continue fighting for justice for Letitia Washington and her son. What do you think of Marcus's decision to take this case despite the warnings? Would you have had the courage to stand up against a corrupt system knowing the personal and professional risks? Comment number 1 if you believe Marcus made the right choice in helping Jamal, or number 2 if you think he should have listened to the warnings. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this brave attorney navigates the dangerous waters ahead. Will the crucial video evidence ever be admitted in court, or will Detective McAllister's powerful connections continue to obstruct justice? The battle has only just begun. The rejection of their key evidence was just the beginning of what would become a systematic campaign to derail justice for Letitia Washington. Marcus quickly discovered that Judge Howard Brennan's impartiality was questionable at best. The 63-year-old judge had been appointed after serving as legal counsel to the police union and maintained close personal relationships with Police Commissioner Richard Bennett. Over his 15-year tenure, Judge Brennan had never ruled against the police in any misconduct case. "This isn't just bias," Marcus explained to Eloise as they sat in her kitchen. "It's a structural barrier intentionally designed to protect officers like McAllister." Outside, a police cruiser drove slowly past the house for the third time that day. Jamal, who had been coloring at the table, ducked beneath it at the sight of the vehicle. "They've been driving by regularly," Eloise said quietly. "Sometimes they park across the street for hours." The intimidation tactics didn't stop there. When Marcus filed a formal complaint about Judge Brennan's conflict of interest, the courthouse mysteriously lost the paperwork twice. When he attempted to refile, he was informed of a new procedural requirement that hadn't existed the previous week. Meanwhile, District Attorney Lawrence Phillips publicly announced his office had reviewed the shooting and found no grounds for criminal charges against Detective McAllister. The DA dismissed the video evidence as potentially manipulated, despite having never viewed it himself. "The system is closing ranks," Marcus told Diana Chen, a colleague from his New York days, during a late-night phone call. "Every avenue we pursue gets blocked by some convenient technicality." "Document everything," Diana advised. "This level of obstruction could eventually help build a federal civil rights case." The following morning, Marcus was pulled over while driving to his office. The officer claimed he had run a stop sign, though no stop sign existed on that stretch of road. The traffic stop lasted 45 minutes, while the officer meticulously inspected his vehicle and papers. When Marcus arrived at his office afterward, he found his secretary in tears. "Two officers came by," she explained nervously. "They said they were conducting a routine check, but kept asking questions about the Washington case and taking pictures of our files through the glass door. When I asked for a warrant, they said they didn't need one for a friendly visit." The pressure extended to the Washington family directly. Jamal's school called Eloise to report he had become uncooperative after refusing to participate in a safety with police presentation, where Officer McAllister's partner was the guest speaker. The same day, Eloise received notice that her property taxes had been reassessed, inexplicably doubling despite no improvements to the home. When Marcus organized a community press conference to address the harassment, 3 venues cancelled on them last minute, citing scheduling conflicts. They eventually held the event in Pastor Keith Jenkins' church, but local media either didn't show or buried the story in brief mentions. The Atlanta Tribune ran a front-page profile of Detective McAllister, portraying him as a dedicated officer temporarily sidelined by unsubstantiated accusations. The article questioned Marcus's motives, highlighting his outsider status after years in New York, and insinuating he was using the case for publicity. The Washington home was vandalized one night with spray-painted racial slurs across the garage door. When Eloise reported it, officers took 4 hours to respond and suggested it was probably just teenage pranks, despite the targeted nature of the attack. Community support began to waver as the intimidation spread. Neighbors who had initially agreed to testify about past incidents involving McAllister suddenly developed memory problems. A local business owner who had offered financial support for the legal case, called to withdraw after health inspectors, suddenly appeared at his restaurant for 3 consecutive days. "They're isolating us," Eloise observed, as another neighbor crossed the street to avoid speaking with her, "making us toxic so no one will stand with us." Marcus spent long nights researching alternatives, discovering that their options narrowed daily. Appeals of Judge Brennan's evidence ruling were denied without explanation. Attempts to have the case moved to a different jurisdiction were rejected. Every legal avenue seemed blocked by the same invisible but powerful forces. Jamal's nightmares intensified. He would wake screaming, "They're coming for us next!" Eloise began sleeping in his room, worried about both his psychological state and their physical safety. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, Marcus discovered a rarely used legal procedure while poring over state law books at the university library. Georgia had a special provision allowing a child witness to serious crimes to testify directly to a grand jury, without the district attorney's approval in extraordinary circumstances. "It's a narrow pathway," Marcus explained to Eloise, "created decades ago for child abuse cases. when prosecutors were reluctant to bring charges against powerful community figures. It hasn't been used in years, but it's still valid law. Are you saying Jamal would have to testify? Eloise asked, concern etched across her face. He's already been through so much. It would be challenging, Marcus admitted. But this provision would bypass D.A. Phillips and Judge Brennan entirely. If the grand jury hears Jamal's testimony and sees the video evidence, they could indict McAllister, regardless of what the department or DA wants. Eloise sighed heavily. I'll need to talk with Jamal. This has to be his choice. He's lost so much already. That night she gently explained the situation to her grandson. Jamal, honey, Mr. Reynolds thinks there might be a way to make the police, man who hurt your mama, face consequences. But you would need to tell your story to some important people who could help. It's completely your choice. No one will be mad if you don't want to. Jamal sat silently for a long moment, clutching the dinosaur book his mother had bought him. Finally, he looked up with an expression far too determined for his 7 years. Mama always said we have to stand up when things are wrong, even when... It's scary, he said quietly. I want to tell them what happened to her. I want them to know the truth. Eloise hugged him tightly, her heart breaking for the burden her grandson carried, yet swelling with pride at his courage. Then we'll stand with you, every step of the way, she promised. Marcus filed the necessary motions the next morning, setting in motion what would become their most significant challenge yet, preparing a traumatized 7-year-old to testify against a system determined to silence him. The news that Jamal Washington would testify before a grand jury sent shockwaves through the Oakwood County legal establishment. Marcus had filed the motion discreetly, but within hours, McAllister's defense team had somehow obtained the information and launched an aggressive counter-offensive. A child's imagination and an adult's coaching are a dangerous combination, McAllister's attorney, Richard Blackwell, told reporters outside the courthouse. Detective McAllister has served this community with distinction for 15 years. His career and reputation shouldn't be destroyed based on the confused recollections of a traumatized child. Meanwhile, Marcus began the delicate process of preparing Jamal for testimony. Rather than formal preparation in his office, Marcus visited the Washington home regularly, creating a comfortable environment where Jamal could gradually become accustomed to talking about what happened. We're not rehearsing answers, Marcus explained to Eloise. That would be improper and could hurt our case. Instead, we're helping Jamal become comfortable telling his story in his own words, building his confidence to speak in an intimidating setting. They used role-playing games where Jamal practiced answering questions about simple topics first, then gradually approached the difficult subject of his mother's death. A child psychologist specializing in trauma volunteered her services, helping Jamal process his experiences while ensuring the preparation didn't re-traumatize him. Eloise worried constantly. Some nights he seems stronger, more like himself. Other nights the nightmares are so bad he can't even speak in the morning. I don't know if he can handle the pressure of the courtroom. Jamal is remarkably resilient, Marcus assured her, though his own concerns grew as their court date approached. We'll request accommodations to make the process less intimidating. He can have a support person present, and we'll ask that McAllister not be in the room during his testimony. 2 weeks before the grand jury date, a new challenge emerged. Child. Protective Services appeared at Eloise's door, citing an anonymous concern about Jamal's welfare. We've received reports that the minor child is being subjected to unnecessary legal stress that may constitute emotional abuse, the CPS worker explained while examining their home. His involvement in adult legal matters raises serious concerns about his guardian's judgment. Eloise was devastated. They're trying to take him away from me, she sobbed to Marcus after the CPS visit. After everything he's lost, they want to put him in the system. Marcus immediately filed for an emergency hearing to block any potential removal. This is transparent intimidation, he argued before Judge Catherine Moore, who thankfully wasn't part of Brennan's circle. The timing of this CPS investigation, based on an anonymous complaint with no substantiated concerns, clearly indicates its retaliation for the upcoming grand jury testimony. Judge Moore agreed, issuing a temporary order preventing Jamal's removal pending a full hearing. However, the CPS investigation remained open, hanging over the family like a shadow. The night before the grand jury hearing, Marcus worked late at his office, finalizing his presentation strategy. Around midnight, he heard glass breaking. Two masked figures had smashed his office window and were ransacking his files. By the time police responded to the alarm, the intruders had fled, taking the Washington case files and destroying Marcus's computer. The responding officers seemed remarkably unconcerned. Probably just kids looking for cash, one suggested, despite the targeted nature of the break-in. Marcus found a threatening note among the wreckage. Children should be seen, not heard. Last warning. With his files stolen and computer destroyed, Marcus worked through the night recreating his materials from memory and backups. By morning, he was exhausted, but determined as he met Eloise and Jamal at the courthouse. The grand jury room was intimidating even for adults, with its wood-paneled walls and formal atmosphere. Marcus had secured permission for Eloise to accompany Jamal to the witness stand, though she couldn't speak during his testimony. The jury foreperson, a middle-aged black woman named Deborah Marshall, made special efforts to welcome Jamal and explain the process in child-friendly terms. "You're not in any trouble, Jamal," she assured him. "We just want to hear what you saw that night. The most important thing is to tell the truth, even if it's hard or scary." Jamal nodded solemnly, his small legs dangling from the witness chair. When questioned, his voice started as a whisper but gradually strengthened as he recounted the events of March 15th. "We were just going home," he explained. "The policeman stopped us and said Mama had a broken taillight, but she didn't. She was being really polite and showing him her nurse ID. Then he got really mad when he saw her phone. He said something about you people and reached in the car. Mama moved back and then he shot her." Jamal's voice broke. 3 times. "I counted. She looked at me before she died. She told me to be brave." A juror asked, "Jamal, did your mother threaten the officer in any way?" "No, ma'am," Jamal replied firmly. "Mama always said be extra polite to police so they don't get scared. She had her hands where he could see them the whole time, just like she taught me to do." "And what happened after the shooting?" the prosecutor asked gently. "The policeman called someone on his radio. He said Mama tried to hurt him, but that was a lie. More police came really fast. They all talked together before anyone helped Mama. I grabbed her phone and put it in my dinosaur backpack because I knew they'd take it away. The policeman looked scared after he shot her, but then he looked normal when the other police came." Jamal identified Detective McAllister from a photo array without hesitation. "That's him. I remember his face. He had a little scar by his eye, and his nameplate said McAllister." When shown stills from the video, carefully selected to avoid traumatizing him further, Jamal confirmed the sequence of events they depicted. The grand jury watched the complete video evidence, their expressions solemn as Letitia Washington's final moments played before them. After 3 hours of testimony and evidence presentation, the grand jury voted to indict Detective Wade McAllister for second-degree murder and evidence tampering. The news spread quickly through the courthouse, then across Atlanta. Community members gathered outside in spontaneous celebration, many weeping with relief that the system had for once worked. Jamal emerged from the courthouse holding his grandmother's hand, exhausted but standing taller than he had in months. Marcus fielded questions from reporters while keeping the Washingtons shielded from the cameras. "Today a brave young boy spoke truth to power," Marcus told the press. "The grand jury heard evidence that has been systematically suppressed and made the right decision. This indictment is just the beginning, but it's a vital first step toward justice for Letitia Washington." The celebration proved short-lived. That evening, as Marcus was briefing Eloise on next steps, his phone rang. The court clerk sounded apologetic. "Mr. Reynolds, I've been instructed to inform you that Judge Brennan has issued an emergency stay on the indictment, citing unprecedented procedural concerns. He's scheduled a review hearing for next week." "He can't do that," Marcus protested. "A grand jury indictment moves directly to arraignment. There's no judicial review stage." "I'm just relaying the order, sir," the clerk responded uncomfortably. "Judge Brennan has created a special proceeding in this case." Marcus hung up, his expression grim as he explained to Eloise. Judge Brennan is inventing legal procedures to block the indictment. I've never seen anything like this in my entire career. So even with the video, even with Jamal's testimony, they're still protecting him? Eloise asked, her voice breaking. They're trying, Marcus confirmed, but they've made a critical mistake. By creating this unprecedented review process, they've opened new avenues for appeal and potentially federal oversight. This isn't over, Eloise, not by a long shot. As night fell, Jamal curled up on the couch, finally sleeping peacefully after the emotional day. He had done everything asked of him, showing remarkable courage in the face of intimidation. Now it was the adult's turn to fight the next battle in a war that grew more complex with each passing day. The morning after Judge Brennan's unprecedented stay on the indictment, Marcus knew he needed to change his approach. Fighting through conventional legal channels clearly wasn't working against a system so thoroughly corrupted. He needed evidence of the corruption itself. Marcus contacted Peter Griffin, a former client who worked as a clerk in the police department's records division. I need to verify something without setting off alarms, Marcus explained carefully during their meeting in a coffee shop far from downtown. What exactly are you looking for? Peter asked nervously. The original police radio transcripts from the night Letitia Washington was killed. I have reason to believe they may have been altered in the official report. Peter hesitated. That's risky. Those records are supposedly secure. People are already breaking into my office and threatening. A 7-year-old, Marcus replied. I'll take full responsibility if anyone discovers your involvement. 2 days later, Peter delivered a flash drive containing audio files of police communications from March 15th. Marcus listened intently, then played them again, his suspicions confirmed. According to department protocol, officers must call in all traffic stops before approaching vehicles. The recordings contained no such call from Detective McAllister before Letitia's shooting. Only after shots were fired did he radio for backup, claiming an officer-involved shooting following a combative suspect encounter. This directly contradicted McAllister's statement, claiming he had followed proper procedure throughout the stop. More significantly, it suggested premeditation. McAllister had never intended this to be an official traffic stop. Marcus brought this evidence to Judge Catherine Moore, who had previously ruled in their favor regarding the CPS investigation. Your Honor, I'm requesting an emergency evidentiary hearing. These recordings prove Detective McAllister never called in the traffic stop, contradicting his sworn testimony and suggesting this was a targeted encounter rather than a random stop. Judge Moore reviewed the evidence and granted the hearing, scheduling it for the following week, 1 day before Judge Brennan's review of the indictment. Meanwhile, Jamal had begun drawing detailed pictures of the night his mother died. One drawing particularly caught Marcus's attention. It showed a second police car parked down the street during the shooting, with a figure watching from inside. This detail had never appeared in any police report. Jamal, Marcus asked gently, who is this in the other police car? The other policeman, Jamal explained matter-of-factly. He didn't come help Mama. He just watched and then drove away really fast after the shooting. This revelation stunned Marcus. Was he in uniform? Do you remember what he looked like? Jamal described a white officer with a buzz cut and a birthmark on his neck. Marcus immediately recognized the description of Officer Brian Kovac, McAllister's regular partner, who had claimed to be off duty that night. Marcus located a recent newspaper photo showing Kovac at a police charity event and showed it to Jamal, mixed with several other officer photos. Jamal immediately identified him. That's him, the one who watched and didn't help. This changed everything. If Officer Kovac had witnessed the shooting but falsified reports claiming he wasn't present, it suggested a broader conspiracy and cover-up, beyond McAllister alone. Through courthouse connections, Marcus obtained Kovac's address and drove by the officer's home, noting a for sale sign in the yard. The house appeared vacant, suggesting Kovac might be preparing to leave town. On a hunch, Marcus tracked down Kovac's ex-wife, Amanda, who had divorced him the previous year. Amanda initially refused to speak with him, but when Marcus mentioned Letitia Washington's case, her demeanor changed. Brian came home that night completely shaken, she finally admitted. It was after midnight. He went straight to the laundry room and washed his uniform, which had what looked like blood spatter on the sleeve. When I asked what happened, he said, "Wade went too far this time, way too far." He wouldn't say anything else, but he was drinking heavily and kept saying his career was over if he didn't stick to the story. Marcus recorded her statement and added it to his growing evidence file. The following day, a startling announcement appeared in court records. Judge Howard Brennan had recused himself from the Washington case without explanation, and the case had been reassigned to Judge Amara Johnson, a highly respected black judge known for her impartiality and thorough knowledge of the law. The reason for Brennan's sudden recusal became clear when the Atlanta Sentinel published financial records showing the judge had received substantial donations from the police union to his re-election campaign, creating a clear conflict of interest. An anonymous source had provided the documentation to investigative reporter Samantha Peters. With Judge Johnson now presiding, the indictment against McAllister was quickly reinstated. The detective was suspended without pay pending trial, and a trial date was set for 60 days later. For the first time, the Washingtons and their supporters felt the system might actually work as intended. Jamal began showing signs of recovery. He returned to school part-time and even joined a children's astronomy club at the local science center. Eloise noticed him laughing again while watching cartoons, something she hadn't heard since before Letitia's death. Then Officer Brian Kovach was found dead in his apartment from a gunshot wound to the head. The department immediately ruled it a suicide, releasing a purported note in which Kovach confessed to falsifying reports about the Washington case, but maintained that McAllister had acted in self-defense when Letitia made a threatening movement. The media narrative shifted dramatically. Headlines suggested Kovach had been the bad apple, who pressured McAllister into a more aggressive policing style and then covered up procedural mistakes after the shooting. McAllister's attorney held fair press conference portraying his client as another victim of Kovach's corruption and manipulation. After visiting the scene, Marcus had serious doubts about the suicide determination. The gunshot angle seemed improbable for self-infliction, and Kovach had strangely emptied his refrigerator and cancelled utilities before his death, actions inconsistent with someone planning suicide, but consistent with someone planning to disappear, did. The authorities really just pin everything on a conveniently deceased Officer Kovach. What do you think happened to him? Comment number 1 if you believe Kovach was silenced to protect more powerful figures, or number 2 if you think he took his own life out of guilt. This case keeps getting deeper and more dangerous with each revelation. If you're following this shocking story of corruption and cover-ups, hit that like button and subscribe to find out what Marcus discovers next. Will justice prevail against a system willing to go to such extreme lengths to protect its own? Just how high does this conspiracy reach? The morning after Kovach's death, Marcus arrived at his office to find an unmarked manila envelope had been slipped under his door overnight. Inside were financial documents showing Detective Wade McAllister had received multiple payments totaling over $70,000 from a company called Oakwood Ventures LLC over the past 18 months. The amounts were disguised as security consultation fees, but the timing coincided perfectly with increased police activity in Pinewood. A post-it note attached to the document simply read, "Follow the money. Not everyone with a badge is corrupt." Marcus spent the day verifying the document's authenticity and researching Oakwood Ventures. The real estate development company had been systematically acquiring properties throughout Pinewood at below-market rates, particularly in areas where police had increased patrols and arrests, driving down property values. Their parent company, Wilcox Development Group, had transformed 3 other predominantly black neighborhoods in different cities using the same pattern: increased police presence, followed by property devaluation and mass purchases. Marcus connected with community activist Darius Wells, who had worked with Letitia Washington on organizing Pinewood residents against predatory development. "Letitia was our record keeper," Darius explained, showing Marcus a community map with red pins indicating recent arrests and blue pins showing properties acquired by Oakwood. The pattern was unmistakable. She maintained a database tracking every incident, every property transaction, She had started noticing that specific officers, including McAllister, consistently patrolled streets where Oakwood wanted to acquire property. Did she ever confront anyone about this pattern? Marcus asked. Darius nodded grimly. 3 days before she was killed, Letitia spoke at a community meeting. Representatives from Oakwood were there, along with some city officials. She presented her data showing the correlation between increased policing and their acquisitions. She specifically named Detective McAllister as appearing in neighborhoods right before property values dropped. The Oakwood reps walked out, and one of them was on his phone immediately afterward. This revelation transformed their understanding of the case. Letitia hadn't been killed during a random traffic stop that escalated. She had been targeted specifically because of her community organizing against Oakwood Ventures' gentrification efforts. Marcus filed an emergency motion with Judge Johnson requesting the financial evidence be admitted in McAllister's trial and asking for additional discovery related to Oakwood Ventures' connections to the police department. Judge Johnson reviewed the evidence and granted the motion despite vehement objections from the prosecution. The court finds sufficient connection between these financial transactions and the defendant's alleged actions to warrant further investigation, she ruled. The prosecution will provide all communication records between Detective McAllister and any representatives of Oakwood Ventures or its parent company within 7 days. That evening, Judge Johnson's car crashed on her way home from the courthouse when her brakes failed completely. She survived, but suffered severe injuries requiring extensive surgery, rendering her unable to continue presiding over the case. The timing was suspicious enough that the State Judicial Ethics Committee launched an investigation, but with Judge Johnson hospitalized, the Washington case was reassigned to Judge William Farley, a 59-year-old white judge with connections to Atlanta's business community. Judge Farley's first action was to reverse Johnson's ruling on the Oakwood Ventures evidence. This court finds the financial transactions between the defendant and a real estate company to be irrelevant to the immediate circumstances of the shooting, he declared. The jury will focus solely on the events of March 15th without speculation about broader motivations. Marcus filed an immediate appeal, but the process would take weeks at minimum. Meanwhile, Eloise received a certified letter claiming there were irregularities with her home title and that ownership had reverted to Pinewood Properties LLC, a subsidiary of Oakwood Ventures. The letter demanded she vacate within 30 days or face eviction proceedings. "This is impossible," Eloise told Marcus, showing him her deed. "I've owned this home outright for over 20 years. My late husband and I paid off the mortgage before he passed." Marcus investigated and found that similar title challenges had been filed against 12 other properties in Pinewood, all belonging to residents who had worked with Letitia on community organizing. The legal filings exploited obscure property law technicalities and relied on falsified historical records. As Marcus prepared legal responses to these predatory tactics, he received notice from the Georgia Bar Association that his law license was under review based on multiple anonymous complaints alleging ethical violations. The timing made the retaliatory nature obvious, but addressing the complaints would drain precious time and resources away from the Washington case. Through careful research, Marcus discovered that Police Commissioner Richard Bennett sat on the advisory board of Wilcox Development Group, Oakwood Ventures' parent company, receiving substantial compensation for his expertise. This clear conflict of interest explained the department's vigorous protection of McAllister and obstruction of the investigation. Marcus compiled this evidence for a meeting with FBI agent Teresa Wilson, who specialized in public corruption cases. "This goes far beyond a wrongful death," Marcus explained, presenting his documentation. "We're looking at a coordinated conspiracy between police officers, real estate developers, and possibly judges to displace an entire community through intimidation, fraudulent legal maneuvers, and now murder." Agent Wilson reviewed the materials carefully. "You've done impressive work here, Mr. Reynolds. This pattern of corruption would fall under federal jurisdiction. I'll need to consult with my superiors, but I believe we have grounds to open a formal investigation." 2 days later, before the FBI could act, Mayor Franklin held a press conference announcing an independent review of allegations regarding connections between the police department and Oakwood Ventures. Many community members viewed this as an attempt to preempt and control the more serious federal investigation. With pressure mounting from multiple directions, McAllister's attorney approached Marcus with a plea offer. His client would plead guilty to negligent homicide, receive a suspended sentence with probation, and surrender his badge permanently in exchange for dropping all other charges. District Attorney Phillips personally called to urge acceptance of the deal. Reynolds, be realistic. You're fighting against an entire system here. Judges can be replaced, evidence can disappear, witnesses can change their stories. Take the win. McAllister loses his job and gets a conviction on his record. That's more than most victims' families get in these cases. Marcus brought the offer to Eloise and explained the situation honestly. This plea would guarantee some measure of accountability, but not real justice. McAllister wouldn't serve any prison time. On the other hand, continuing to fight means significant risk. We've already seen how far they'll go to protect their interests. Eloise consulted with Jamal in a way appropriate for his age, explaining that the bad policeman might say he did something wrong, but wouldn't go to jail. Jamal's response was immediate and firm. Mama always said, "We don't take shortcuts when things are important," he stated with the simple clarity of a child. She wouldn't take that deal. Eloise relayed the decision to Marcus. "We continue fighting, not just for Letitia, but for everyone in Pinewood. These people took my daughter. I won't let them take our homes and community too." Marcus nodded, both concerned and proud of their determination. "Then we prepare for trial and keep building the broader case. But Eloise, they're going to come at us even harder now." "Let them come," she replied with quiet dignity. "We have something they don't." "What's that?" Marcus asked. "The truth. And Letitia always said truth doesn't stay buried forever, no matter how much dirt they pile on top." The rejection of McAllister's plea deal triggered an immediate escalation against the Washington family and the broader Pinewood community. City inspectors suddenly appeared at Eloise's home, citing her for minor code violations that had been ignored for decades across the neighborhood. Jamal's school counselor recommended psychological evaluation after he allegedly exhibited concerning behaviors, though his teacher confidentially told Eloise that he was actually adjusting well. With his law license under review, Marcus faced his own professional crisis. Existing clients were pressured to find new representation, and potential clients were warned away. His landlord abruptly doubled his office rent, forcing him to relocate to a small space above a barbershop owned by a supportive Pinewood resident. Meanwhile, other homeowners in Pinewood received title challenges similar to Eloise's. Marcus organized community meetings at New Hope Baptist Church, where Pastor Keith Jenkins offered sanctuary for residents to share information and coordinate their legal responses. "What we're seeing is not just about Letitia Washington anymore," Marcus explained to the packed church sanctuary. "This is a coordinated attempt to displace an entire community. They're using the police, the courts, and now fraudulent legal filings to force people from homes they've owned for generations." Darius Wells projected Letitia's data onto the church wall, showing the clear pattern of targeted policing followed by property acquisition. Letitia documented everything. This map shows every incident over the past 2 years. The strategy is clear. Create an atmosphere of fear and instability, drive down property values, then swoop in with lowball offers that desperate residents feel they can't refuse. Elderly residents shared stories of being stopped and questioned multiple times while walking in their own neighborhood. Business owners described frequent inspections that drove away customers. Parents talked about police cars following their children home from school. "This isn't random," one resident observed. "They're targeting the homes around the planned Oak Ridge Plaza development first. It's like they're clearing a path." The community developed a mutual support system. Residents with legal knowledge helped others respond to fraudulent claims. Those with home repair skills addressed code violations cited by inspectors. A phone tree alerted neighbors whenever suspicious activity occurred. What had been a neighborhood under siege slowly transformed into a united community of resistance. 3 consecutive Sunday meetings passed without incident, giving everyone false confidence. On the 4th Sunday, as Marcus was explaining residents' legal rights regarding eviction notices, police cruisers surrounded the church. Officers entered with a warrant, claiming they had received credible reports of drug activity during the meetings. Pastor Jenkins protested, "This is a church gathering to discuss community legal issues. There are no drugs here. We have a confidential informant who says otherwise," the lead officer responded. "Everyone remains seated while we conduct our search. But instead of searching for drugs, officers confiscated phones, laptops and all, of Letitia's research materials. When Darius Wells objected, he was immediately arrested for interfering with police business. Pastor Jenkins was handcuffed after asking to see the specific areas covered by the warrant. 5 other community members were arrested on various pretextual charges when they questioned the officers' actions. Marcus managed to surreptitiously record the raid on his phone, capturing footage of officers ignoring the actual scope of the warrant and targeting only information related to Oakwood Ventures. He narrowly avoided arrest by stepping outside to get better reception when uploading the video to a secure cloud server. The footage went viral overnight. National news networks picked up the story of police raiding a church community meeting, particularly given the connection to the already controversial Washington case. Civil rights organizations issued statements condemning the blatant intimidation tactics and criminalization of community organizing. The increased scrutiny brought unexpected allies. Diana Chen, a prominent civil rights attorney who had worked with Marcus in New York, called to offer her assistance. "This has escalated beyond what one lawyer can handle, Marcus. My firm is willing to provide resources and additional counsel pro bono. This pattern of corruption and civil rights violations needs to be exposed." With Diana's help, Marcus secured the release of those arrested during the raid and filed emergency motions to have the seized materials returned. More significantly, her firm's researchers uncovered documentation proving Police Commissioner Richard Bennett had not merely sat on an advisory board for Wilcox Development, but held significant equity in the company worth several $1,000,000. This explosive conflict of interest made national headlines. Mayor Franklin, initially defensive of the police department, called for Commissioner Bennett to take administrative leave pending investigation. State and federal authorities began examining the connections between the police department, the courts, and Oakwood Ventures. As public pressure mounted, McAllister found himself increasingly isolated. His police union representation grew lukewarm as the corruption allegations expanded beyond a single shooting. Former colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with what was evolving into a major scandal. Through his attorney, McAllister reached out with a revised plea offer. He would plead guilty to second-degree murder with a recommended sentence of 7 years, eligible for parole after serving 3. In exchange, he would provide testimony about the broader conspiracy between the police department and Oakwood Ventures. The district attorney personally urged Marcus to accept this deal. This case has become a political liability for everyone involved, D.A. Phillips admitted candidly. The department wants it resolved before more connections come to light. Take the deal, Reynolds. McAllister goes to prison, you get testimony that helps the broader case against Oakwood, and the community gets some measure of justice. Marcus brought the offer to Eloise and explained the implications. This is a significant improvement over the previous offer. McAllister would serve actual prison time and provide evidence that could help stop the predatory development threatening Pinewood. "What happens to the other officers involved?" Eloise asked. "The ones who helped cover up Letitia's murder?" "That would depend on McAllister's testimony and the ongoing investigations," Marcus explained. "But this deal would focus primarily on McAllister himself." Eloise considered this carefully. "I need to talk with Jamal. He deserves a voice in this decision." That evening, Eloise gently explained the situation to her grandson. The bad policeman might go to jail for a while, but not as long as he should. He would tell the truth about the other bad people who helped him. "What do you think Mama would want us to do?" Jamal sat quietly, playing with the solar system model Marcus had given him, Finally, he looked up. Mama didn't just care about one bad person. She cared about everybody in Pinewood. She wouldn't take a deal that only fixed part of the problem. Eloise hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes. You sound just like her, you know that? When Eloise relayed their decision to Marcus and Diana, the attorneys exchanged concerned glances. This means we're taking the case to trial against a defendant who's now motivated to protect his colleagues, Diana warned. And we're still facing a potentially biased judge and a system with tremendous resources. We understand the risks, Eloise replied firmly, but this isn't just about punishing one officer anymore. It's about exposing the entire corrupt system that took my daughter and is trying to take our community. Letitia would want us to see this through no matter how difficult. Marcus nodded, both concerned and impressed by their resolve. Then we prepare for the fight of our lives. Trial begins in 3 weeks, and they'll use every tactic they can to undermine our case. We'll be ready, Eloise promised. Pinewood stands together now, thanks to Letitia. Her work continues through all of us. The 3 weeks before trial unfolded like a carefully orchestrated campaign against justice. As Marcus and Diana prepared their case, obstacles materialized with suspicious regularity. Key evidence was misplaced by the court clerk's office. Witnesses reported intimidating visits from police officers just checking in. The forensic expert who had analyzed the shooting video received a lucrative job offer from another state, conveniently requiring immediate relocation. Jury selection became its own battleground. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Mitchell, assigned to prosecute the case, systematically excluded nearly every black potential juror through peremptory challenges. When Marcus objected, citing the pattern of racial exclusion, Judge Farley dismissed his concerns. The prosecution has provided race-neutral explanations for each challenge. This court finds no evidence of discriminatory intent. The final jury included 11 white members and 1 elderly black woman, who had emphasized during selection that her nephew was a police officer. The demographic makeup stood in stark contrast to the diverse Atlanta community, and particularly to Pinewood's predominantly black population. They've stacked the jury against us, Diana observed grimly after selection concluded. We'll need to be exceptional with the evidence and testimony to overcome this disadvantage. The prosecution's strategy soon became clear. Attack Letitia, Washington's character and community activism. Local news outlets suddenly ran stories highlighting her confrontational approach at community meetings and anti-police rhetoric on social media. Carefully selected quotes from her posts criticizing police brutality were presented without context, painting her as someone who consistently challenged authority. Marcus received a call from Jamal's teacher, Miss Patterson, who spoke in hushed tones. I wanted you to know the principal called me into his office yesterday. He pressured me to document that Jamal has been exhibiting aggressive tendencies in class. When I refused, saying it wasn't true, he reminded me that my contract renewal is coming up. Is Jamal actually having problems at school? Marcus asked, concerned. Quite the opposite, Ms. Patterson assured him. He's working through his grief. Remarkably well. He's quiet but engaged, kind to other students, and his work is improving weekly. This is pure fabrication to discredit him as a witness. Marcus thanked her for her integrity and arranged additional support for Jamal at school, knowing the teacher had risked her job by coming forward. Meanwhile, Diana's background investigation into Ada Sarah Mitchell uncovered a significant conflict of interest. Before joining the district attorney's office, Mitchell had worked for Hargrove and Bennett, a law firm that represented Oakwood Ventures in numerous real estate transactions. She had personally handled several cases involving property acquisitions in communities similar to Pinewood. Marcus and Diana immediately filed a motion requesting Mitchell's removal from the case due to this conflict. After a contentious hearing, Judge Farley reluctantly granted the motion. Unable to ignore such an obvious ethical violation, even with his apparent bias, Mitchell's replacement proved equally problematic. Theodore Grant, a veteran prosecutor known for his unwavering support of law enforcement, took over the case with barely concealed disdain for the defense team. In his first appearance, Grant requested all evidence related to Oakwood Ventures be excluded as irrelevant and prejudicial. Your Honor, Grant argued smoothly, this case concerns only the events of a single traffic stop on March 15th. The defense is attempting to introduce a conspiracy theory involving real estate development that has no bearing on Detective McAllister's actions that night. Diana countered forcefully. The financial relationship between Detective McAllister and Oakwood Ventures establishes clear motive. This wasn't a random traffic stop that escalated. It was a targeted killing of a community activist who threatened their development plans. The jury deserves to hear the complete truth. Judge Farley sided with the prosecution, limiting evidence to the immediate circumstances of the shooting. The court will not allow this trial to become a referendum on urban development or police department policies, he ruled. The jury will focus solely on the defendant's actions and reasonableness of his fear for safety during the traffic stop. This ruling severely undermined their case by eliminating the context and motive for McAllister's actions. Without the Oakwood connection, the jury would see only a police officer claiming he perceived a threat, not a calculated silencing of community opposition. Just days before the trial, another blow struck. Luis Mendoza, a rideshare driver who had witnessed McAllister following Letitia's car before the traffic stop, disappeared. His family reported that police officers had questioned him repeatedly in the weeks prior. His testimony would have proven that McAllister had targeted Letitia specifically, rather than stopping her randomly for a traffic violation. They've systematically dismantled our case, Marcus admitted during a strategy session with Diana and Heloise. Favorable witnesses intimidated or disappeared, key evidence excluded, a jury selected for likely sympathy to law enforcement. Even with the video, conviction is far from certain. So they win again, Eloise said bitterly. The system protects its own, just like always. Not necessarily, Diana replied, studying her notes. We still have the video showing the shooting itself. We have Jamal's testimony, and sometimes pressure creates unexpected opportunities. As if summoned by her words, a court officer delivered a package addressed to Jamal Washington. Inside were Letitia's personal effects from the night of her death, finally released after months in evidence storage. Among the items, her purse, wallet, nursing ID, and a small voice recorder she routinely carried to community meetings. Marcus stared at the recorder in disbelief. The department had this all along. Did they even check it? He connected the device to his computer. The final recording began moments before the traffic stop and captured the entire interaction, including crucial seconds not visible in the phone video. McAllister's voice came through with chilling clarity. You people don't belong here anymore. Oakwood's paying good money to clean up this neighborhood, and troublemakers like you are in the way. The recording captured the entire shooting, followed by McAllister's call to dispatch with his fabricated version of events. Most damningly, it recorded his conversation with Officer Kovac, who arrived immediately after. She was the one from the meetings. Bennett said she was becoming a problem. It's handled now. This evidence transformed their case, providing both the missing motive and direct evidence of the conspiracy. Marcus immediately filed a motion to include the audio recording, arguing that since it had been in police possession all along, the defense had no grounds to challenge its admissibility. Does this new evidence finally give Marcus and Jamal a fighting chance at justice? Or will the corrupt system find yet another way to bury the truth? Comment number 1 if you believe this audio recording will break the case wide open, or number 2 if you think the system will still protect McAllister despite this evidence. If this courtroom battle has you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe for tomorrow's dramatic conclusion. Will a 7-year-old boy's courage and determination be enough to bring down not just one corrupt officer, but an entire network of corruption? The most shocking revelations are still to come. The courthouse steps teemed with protesters from both sides on the morning of the trial. McAllister supporters, many in police blue, gathered on one side with signs reading, "Support our officers," and "Split-second decisions save lives." On the IDE, opposite side, Pinewood residents and civil rights activists countered with "Justice for Letitia" and "Black Lives Matter" placards. A heavy police presence kept the groups separated as media crews captured the tension. Inside the crowded courtroom, Marcus and Diana sat with Eloise and Jamal at the defense table. Despite their efforts to shield him from the circus atmosphere, Jamal appeared small and vulnerable in his navy blue suit. Across the aisle, McAllister presented a stark contrast, confident in his tailored grey suit, surrounded by his legal team and supporters from the department. Judge Farley entered, and the proceedings began with opening statements. Prosecutor Theodore Grant approached the jury with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a dedicated public servant forced to make an impossible decision in a fraction of a second," Grant began. Detective Wade McAllister, with 15 years of exemplary service, initiated a routine traffic stop that turned deadly when the driver, Letitia Washington, became combative and reached for an object he couldn't identify. In that moment, Detective McAllister had to make the split-second decision that every officer dreads, whether to use deadly force to protect himself and potentially others. Grant carefully portrayed McAllister as a victim of circumstance, emphasizing the dangers officers face daily. He acknowledged the tragedy of Washington's death, but characterized it as the unfortunate result of her own actions. Regarding the newly discovered audio evidence, Grant dismissed it as heavily edited and impossible to authenticate after months of unknown handling. When Marcus approached the jury for the defense's opening, he carried none of Grant's polished confidence, instead projecting earnest determination. "This case is about a mother murdered in front of her 7-year-old son," Marcus began simply. "Letitia Washington was not killed because of a split-second decision during a routine traffic stop. The evidence will show she was targeted, followed, and executed because she stood in the way of powerful interests who wanted her community for themselves." Marcus played the unedited audio from Letitia's recorder alongside the phone video, creating a devastating multimedia presentation of her final moments. Jurors visibly reacted to McAllister's clear statement about cleaning up the neighborhood and his post-shooting conversation with Kovac, mentioning Commissioner Bennett. "This was not a tragic misunderstanding," Marcus concluded. "This was a calculated silencing of a community voice. Letitia Washington was killed because she documented and exposed the connection between increased police harassment in Pinewood and a deliberate scheme to devalue property for development interests." The evidence will show Detective McAllister wasn't acting as a police officer that night. He was acting as an enforcer for corporate interests that paid him to terrorize a community. Judge Farley, visibly displeased with Marcus's framing, reminded the jury that opening statements weren't evidence, particularly emphasizing that conspiracy theories about real estate development should not influence their consideration of the immediate circumstances of the shooting. The prosecution's case relied heavily on fellow officers testifying to McAllister's character and professionalism. Each described him as a by-the-book officer who had mentored younger colleagues and received commendations for community policing. On cross-examination, Diana methodically exposed contradictions between their current testimony and their initial statements after the shooting. Several officers who originally claimed to have arrived within 1 minute of McAllister's call now acknowledged longer response times, creating a window during which evidence could have been manipulated. The department's forensic expert testified that Letitia's fingerprints were found on the outside of her car door, suggesting she might have been reaching outside the vehicle, as McAllister claimed. During Diana's cross-examination, however, the expert admitted this finding was perfectly consistent with someone simply opening their car door earlier and that no weapon or threatening object was ever found. When McAllister himself took the stand, he projected calm confidence, maintaining eye contact with jurors as he described feeling genuinely threatened during the stop. "Ms. Washington became agitated when I asked for her license," he testified. "She made a sudden movement toward her purse, and based on my training and experience, I perceived an immediate threat." Under Diana's cross-examination, McAllister denied any connection to Oakwood Ventures, claiming the payments identified by the defense were for legitimate security consulting unrelated to his police duties. When confronted with the audio recording, he suggested it had been manipulated and denied making any statements about cleaning up the neighborhood. That is absolutely not my voice on that recording, McAllister insisted, though his complexion had paled noticeably. Diana pressed further. Detective McAllister, can you explain why you never called in the traffic stop before approaching Ms. Washington's vehicle, contrary to department policy? I intended to call it in, but events escalated too quickly, he replied smoothly. And your partner, Officer Kovac, who later died under suspicious circumstances, why did he claim to be off duty that night when the recording clearly captures his voice at the scene immediately after the shooting? Objection, Grant intervened. Counsel is making unsupported insinuations about Officer Kovac's death. Sustained, Judge Farley ruled. The jury will disregard references to suspicious circumstances. Despite these limitations, Diana's cross-examination damaged McAllister's credibility. Several jurors frowned when he claimed not to remember specific questions about his financial relationship with Oakwood executives. His polished demeanor cracked slightly when Diana produced bank records showing a $15,000 deposit to his account 2 days after Letitia's community presentation, naming him specifically. In a surprising strategic move, the defense called Police Commissioner Richard Bennett to testify about department procedures regarding traffic stops. Bennett appeared reluctant, but couldn't refuse without raising suspicions. Under Marcus's careful questioning about proper protocols, Bennett inadvertently opened the door to questions about his own connections to Oakwood Ventures. Commissioner, you testified that officers must call in all traffic stops before approaching vehicles for officer safety. Yet Detective McAllister didn't follow this procedure when stopping Letitia Washington. As his superior, did you ever discuss this violation with him? I wasn't directly involved in reviewing this specific incident, Bennett replied cautiously. Marcus nodded. Yet on the recording, Detective McAllister specifically mentions your name to Officer Kovac, saying Bennett said she was becoming a problem. What problem was Ms. Washington causing that warranted your attention, Commissioner? Bennett shifted, uncomfortably. I have no recollection of any such conversation about Ms. Washington. Perhaps your role on the advisory board of Wilcox Development Group, Oakwood Ventures' parent company, might refresh your memory. Documents show you attended a board meeting where Letitia Washington's community organizing was specifically discussed as an obstacle to the Pinewood acquisition project. Grant objected vehemently, but Judge Farley recognized that Bennett's testimony had opened the door to these previously excluded connections. Reluctantly, he allowed limited exploration of the relationship between the police department and Oakwood Ventures. As this damaging testimony unfolded, a court officer passed Marcus a note. Her juror had contacted the court clerk with disturbing information. Someone had approached him offering $20,000 for a not guilty vote, claiming to represent interested business parties. Rather than request an immediate mistrial, Marcus and Diana coordinated with FBI agents who had been monitoring the case due to the potential civil rights violations. They arranged a sting operation to identify who was behind the jury tampering attempt. The juror, under FBI guidance, arranged a meeting with the middleman who had approached him. With agents surveilling, he met James Wilson, a security consultant employed by Oakwood Ventures. Wilson was arrested attempting to deliver the bribe payment, creating yet another direct link between the development company and attempts to influence the case's outcome. As this breakthrough occurred, Marcus received an urgent call from a neighbor of the Washingtons. Eloise's house was on fire, with flames visible from blocks away. By the time emergency services responded, the structure was engulfed. Fortunately, Eloise and Jamal had been at a hotel under protection since the trial began, but many of their personal belongings were destroyed, including copies of case materials Marcus had provided for their review. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Someone wanted to destroy evidence and intimidate the family simultaneously. When firefighters discovered accelerant patterns indicating arson, the FBI expanded their investigation to include this latest attack. Despite these chaotic developments, Judge Farley refused to delay proceedings. This court will not be influenced by external events that may or may not be connected to this case, he declared firmly. The trial will continue as scheduled. As the defense prepared to call their final and most important witness, Jamal Washington himself, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew palpably tense. Everything now depended on the testimony of a 7-year-old boy against the full power of a system determined to silence him. The morning Jamal was scheduled to testify, social media exploded with claims that the boy had been coached by attorneys and activists. McAllister supporters distributed photographs of Marcus with his arm around Jamal's shoulder, suggesting improper influence. Outside the courthouse, protesters clashed more aggressively, requiring additional security to maintain order. Inside, Jamal sat in a small witness preparation room, looking impossibly small in his pressed shirt and clip-on tie. Eloise straightened, his collar for the 3rd time, her hands trembling slightly. "Remember, baby, just tell the truth exactly as you remember it," she advised gently. "Don't worry about saying things perfectly. Just speak from your heart." Marcus knelt to Jamal's level. The judge and the prosecutor might ask difficult questions. If you don't understand something, it's okay to say so. If you need a break, just let me know. "You're doing an incredibly brave thing today, Jamal," the boy nodded solemnly. "For Mama." "For your mama," Marcus agreed, his voice thick with emotion. When Jamal entered the courtroom, a hush fell over the spectators. Judge Farley had approved specialized accommodations for the child witness, including a lower chair, and permission for Eloise to sit nearby, though not directly beside him. McAllister was instructed to move to the far end of the defense table, minimizing his proximity to Jamal. After being sworn in with simplified language appropriate for his age, Jamal faced Marcus's gentle questioning. "Jamal, do you remember the night your mother was stopped by Detective McAllister?" "Yes, sir." Jamal's voice was soft but clear. "Could you tell us what happened that night in your own words?" Jamal recounted the events with remarkable clarity, describing how his mother had followed all the proper procedures during the stop, keeping her hands visible and explaining her movements. His testimony matched the video and audio evidence perfectly, adding the perspective only he could provide. From the back seat, Mama showed him her nurse ID and told him she worked at the hospital. That's when he got really mad and asked about the meetings. He saw her phone was recording and reached inside the car. Mama moved back, and he shot her. Jamal's voice wavered. 3 times, I counted. "What happened after the shooting?" Marcus asked gently. "The policeman called someone and said Mama tried to attack him, but that wasn't true. I saw everything. Then another police car came really fast, the one that had been following us before we got stopped. They talked a long time before anyone. Checked on Mama. Did you hear what they said to each other?" Jamal nodded. "The first policeman said it's the community organizer from Pinewood. Bennett said she was becoming a problem. The other one got really mad and said, 'You shot her with the kid in the car.' Then they saw me watching and stopped talking. When asked about retrieving his mother's phone, Jamal explained his actions with simple logic. 'I knew they would take it away and nobody would know the truth. Mama always said evidence is important when bad things happen.'" Marcus concluded his direct examination, thanking Jamal for his courage. When Prosecutor Grant approached for cross-examination, his demeanor was carefully calibrated to appear gentle while attempting to undermine the boy's testimony. "Jamal, you've been very brave today," Grant began with a sympathetic smile. "I just have a few questions to help us understand everything clearly. You've spent a lot of time with Mr. Reynolds preparing for today, haven't you?" "Yes, sir." "He helped. Practice answering questions. And did he tell you what to say about Detective McAllister?" Marcus rose immediately. "Objection. Counsel is insinuating witness tampering." "Sustained," Judge Farley ruled, surprising both attorneys. "Mr. Grant, confine your questions to the events themselves." Grant adjusted his approach. "Jamal, it was dark that night, wasn't it? And you were in the back seat. Is it possible you might have missed seeing some things from that position?" "No, sir. The police car lights were really bright, and I could see everything. I was right behind Mama's seat." Grant's questions became increasingly technical, asking about distances, timing, and visibility conditions, clearly attempting to confuse the child witness. When this strategy failed to shake Jamal's consistency, Grant shifted to a more emotionally manipulative approach. "Jamal, don't you think your mother should have simply complied with the officer's instructions immediately instead of questioning why she was stopped?" Wouldn't that have been safer with you in the car? The question struck deep. Jamal's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. Eloise half rose from her seat before restraining herself. The courtroom held its collective breath. When Jamal finally responded, his voice had gained unexpected strength. Mama did exactly what she always taught me to do with police. Be respectful, keep your hands where they can see them, tell them what you're doing before you move. She showed him her ID. She wasn't doing anything wrong. His chin lifted slightly. The policeman was the one who didn't follow the rules. Grant, realizing his tactic had backfired, quickly concluded his cross-examination. As Jamal prepared to step down, Judge Farley asked if he had anything else he wanted to say. Jamal turned to face McAllister directly for the first time. You laughed after you shot my mama. You called for backup and laughed while she was bleeding. Before she died, she whispered to me about the papers in her community binder, all the evidence showing how you and other police were helping Oakwood Ventures force people out of their homes. This unexpected statement stunned the courtroom. McAllister's face drained of color as Jamal continued. Mama knew what you were doing. That's why you killed her. Not because you were scared, but because she had proof about you and Oakwood Ventures. She told me to be brave and make sure people knew the truth. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Judge Farley hammered his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. The jury will disregard the witness's final statement as speculative, he instructed, though the impact was clearly visible on several jurors' faces. As Jamal was escorted from the witness stand, McAllister leaned over to whisper urgently to his attorney. The exchange appeared heated, with McAllister gesturing emphatically, while his lawyer shook his head in apparent disagreement. During the afternoon recess, a courthouse clerk named Valerie Jenkins approached Marcus in the hallway, looking nervously. Over her shoulder, "Mr. Reynolds, I need to show you something," she whispered. "I could lose my job, but this isn't right." She discreetly passed him a thumb drive. Security footage from the judge's chambers corridor, 3 days before the trial began. I was working late filing motions when I saw them meet. They thought the building was empty. That evening, Marcus and Diana reviewed the footage in their hotel room. The video clearly showed Judge Farley meeting privately with McAllister in a courthouse conference room, a serious ethics violation that suggested judicial bias. The timestamp confirmed the meeting occurred after Farley had been assigned to the case, but before trial began. "This is grounds for an immediate mistrial," Diana said. "Farley should have recused himself the moment this case landed on his docket, if he had prior contact with the defendant." "It's risky," Marcus cautioned. "If we're denied, we've shown our hand, and there's no guarantee the next judge would be any better." "We can't let this stand," Diana insisted. "The system only changes when we force it to confront its corruption." The next morning, as court resumed, Marcus rose before proceedings began. "Your Honor, defense moves for an immediate mistrial on grounds of judicial misconduct." Judge Farley's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation, Counselor. On what basis?" "Evidence has come to light showing Your Honor met privately with the defendant 3 days before trial commenced. Security footage from the courthouse confirms this unauthorized ex parte communication." Farley's face flushed with anger. "Mr. Reynolds, these allegations are—" Before he could complete his sentence, the courtroom doors opened, and an FBI agent entered, accompanied by 2 U.S. Marshals. The agent approached the bench and whispered something to Judge Farley. The color drained from the judge's face as he reviewed the document presented to him. After a long, tense moment, Farley cleared his throat. "This court is in recess. In light of circumstances that have arisen, I am recusing myself from this case, effective immediately. A mistrial is declared. This matter will be reassigned to a new judge for retrial." Without further explanation, he rose and exited through his chamber's door. The courtroom erupted in confusion. Marcus turned to Eloise, who clutched Jamal's hand tightly. "What just happened?" she asked. "I think the FBI just expanded their investigation to include Judge Farley," Marcus explained quietly. "This isn't over, but it's a significant victory. With a fair judge, our chances improve dramatically." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Marcus provided a brief statement. "Today, we witnessed the first step toward actual justice. The judicial system must be impartial to function properly. We look forward to presenting our case before a neutral judge who will allow all evidence to be properly considered. As they drove away, Jamal finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "Does this mean the bad police man goes free?" "No, sweetheart," Eloise assured him. "It means we get another chance with a fair judge who will listen to the truth. Your mama would be so proud of you today." The boy nodded solemnly, gazing out the window at the protesters still gathered on the courthouse steps. "I told her I would be brave," he said quietly. "I promised." The mistrial declaration sent shockwaves through Atlanta's legal community. Within days, court documents revealed that Judge Farley was under federal investigation for judicial misconduct in multiple cases, including accepting benefits from companies connected to Oakwood Ventures. The FBI investigation had expanded dramatically, with agents executing search warrants at the police headquarters, several judges' homes, and Oakwood Ventures offices. Police Commissioner Richard Bennett announced his immediate retirement for personal reasons, though sources within the department confirmed he had been asked to resign after federal authorities discovered offshore accounts containing payments from Wilcox Development Group. Judge Howard Brennan, who had initially blocked the video evidence, similarly announced his early retirement before investigators could execute search warrants on his property. National media descended on Atlanta, framing the story as emblematic of systemic corruption in urban development and policing. Investigative journalists uncovered similar patterns in 3 other cities where Wilcox Development had projects, suggesting a corporate strategy of using police intimidation to devalue neighborhoods before acquisition. The new trial was assigned to Judge Michael Torres, a 49-year-old former public defender with a reputation for scrupulous fairness and zero tolerance for procedural abuses. His first action was to order an expanded jury pool to ensure proper demographic representation, specifically addressing the previous jury's lack of diversity. "This court recognizes the community's interest in seeing justice properly administered," Judge Torres stated during the initial hearing. "That requires a jury that reflects the diversity of our city and procedures that guarantee equal application of the law regardless of one's position or connections." Judge Torres ruled that all evidence regarding McAllister's relationship with Oakwood Ventures would be admissible, finding it directly relevant to motive. He also appointed a special master to oversee evidence handling after defense complaints about previous tampering attempts. As the revelations mounted, 6 additional officers were placed on administrative leave pending investigation into their roles in various Pinewood incidents. Internal Affairs opened investigations into 27 cases where excessive force or selective enforcement appeared to target Pinewood residents who opposed development projects. McAllister, now abandoned by his former allies and facing additional federal civil rights charges, appeared increasingly desperate. His previously confident demeanor had given way to nervous agitation during court appearances. Even the police union distanced itself, issuing a statement that officers who abuse their position for personal gain damage the reputation of all who serve honorably. Through his attorney, McAllister floated another plea offer. He would plead guilty to second-degree murder and accept a 20-year sentence in exchange for comprehensive testimony about the entire Oakwood operation, including naming every officer, judge and city official involved in the conspiracy. District Attorney Phillips, himself under scrutiny for his office's handling of the case, recused himself. The newly appointed special prosecutor, Vanessa Rodriguez, presented the offer to Marcus and Diana. McAllister claims he can document a 5-year conspiracy between the department, judiciary, and developers, Rodriguez explained. His testimony would potentially lead to dozens of prosecutions and fundamentally reform the relationship between policing and development in this city. Marcus brought the offer to Eloise and carefully explained the implications. "This is a substantial prison sentence, but less than he might receive if convicted at trial. However, his testimony could help dismantle the entire corrupt system and potentially prevent similar situations in other communities." "What do you recommend?" Eloise asked, looking exhausted from the months of legal battles. "There are no perfect options," Marcus admitted. A trial means reliving the trauma, particularly for Jamal, with no guaranteed outcome. This plea ensures McAllister serves significant time while helping expose everyone involved in Letitia's death, not just the man who pulled the trigger, but those who gave the orders. Eloise nodded thoughtfully. The community needs to weigh in too. This affects all of Pinewood, not just our family. Marcus organized a community meeting at New Hope Baptist Church. Over 200 residents attended, expressing divided opinions. Some demanded maximum punishment for McAllister, viewing anything less as inadequate justice. Others saw strategic value in using his testimony to prosecute higher-level conspirators. Pastor Jenkins offered a perspective that resonated with many. Letitia wasn't fighting against one bad officer. She was fighting against a corrupt system that treated our community as disposable. Perhaps the greatest justice would be destroying that system entirely, even if it means strategic compromise in this one case. Meanwhile, residents fighting eviction gained significant legal ground as Oakwood Ventures' predatory practices came under federal scrutiny. The mayor, distancing himself from the scandal, announced an emergency order freezing all recent property transfers in Pinewood, pending investigation. After extensive discussion with community members, legal advisors, and child psychologists concerned about Jamal's well-being, Eloise made her decision. She sat with Jamal at their temporary apartment, gently explaining the situation in terms he could understand. The policeman who hurt Mama has offered to tell on all the other bad people who helped him, but he would go to jail for a shorter time, she explained. The lawyers think this might help stop other families from getting hurt like ours did. Jamal considered this with remarkable thoughtfulness for his age. Would he still go to jail? For a long time. Yes, baby. 20 years is a very long time. And he would tell on everyone? Even the people who paid him? That's what he's promising, Eloise confirmed. Jamal nodded slowly. Mama always said fixing the big problem is more important than punishing one person. She'd want to help everybody in Pinewood, not just us. Eloise hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. You are so much like her, Jamal, so wise beyond your years. The evening before they were to inform the prosecutor of their decision, McAllister's attorney contacted Marcus with shocking news. His client wanted to make a full public confession, not for a deal, but because he had received a terminal cancer diagnosis and doesn't want to meet his maker with this lie on his soul. He's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the attorney explained. 6 months at most. He wants to clear his conscience before the end. Marcus was skeptical. This sounds convenient. Is there medical confirmation? Full documentation from 3 independent oncologists, the attorney confirmed. This isn't a ploy. He genuinely wants to make what amends he can in the time he has left. The following day, in an unprecedented arrangement approved by Judge Torres, Wade McAllister gave a full videotaped confession with both prosecution and defense attorneys present. He admitted to targeting Letitia Washington specifically because of her organizing efforts, acting on explicit instructions from Commissioner Bennett to send a message to the community. Oakwood was paying bonuses for increased enforcement in targeted acquisition zones. McAllister explained, his voice hollow. The more arrests and citations in an area, the faster property values dropped. Washington was documenting the pattern, connecting the dots between police activity and property sales. Bennett told me she needed to be neutralized before she took her evidence public. McAllister detailed how evidence was planted, witnesses intimidated, and judicial favor secured through campaign contributions and other benefits. He named 12 additional officers directly involved in the conspiracy, along with judges, city officials, and Oakwood executives who orchestrated the scheme. His confession, made without immunity, led to immediate charges against all named conspirators. Oakwood Ventures executives faced federal racketeering charges that expanded to include similar operations in Detroit, Memphis, and Baltimore. The confession rendered a trial unnecessary. McAllister pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and civil rights violations, receiving life imprisonment. Given his medical prognosis, he would die in prison, but his testimony had accomplished what years of legal battles might not have, exposing the entire corrupt system that had taken Letitia Washington's life. 6 months after McAllister's confession, the Pinewood community gathered for the dedication of the Letitia Washington Community Center. The former Oakwood Ventures headquarters had been seized under civil forfeiture and converted into a resource center for residents, housing, legal aid services, a community organizing space, and education programs. Following McAllister's testimony, 27 indictments had been issued against police officers, judges, city officials, and corporate executives involved in the conspiracy. 17 had already pleaded guilty, with sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years. Federal housing authorities had invalidated all fraudulent property transfers, returning homes to their rightful owners while establishing a fund to compensate residents who had been forced out before the scheme was exposed. Most significantly, Pinewood residents had established a community land trust to protect their neighborhood from future predatory development. The trust owned the land beneath hundreds of homes, ensuring long-term affordability while allowing residents to maintain ownership of their houses. Eloise Washington served as the board president, bringing her educator's perspective to the trust's governance. Marcus had transitioned from his small practice to establish the Washington Justice Center, focusing on fighting systemic racism in housing and policing nationwide. With funding from civil rights organizations and a portion of the settlement from the Washington family's successful lawsuit against the city, the center provided legal representation to communities facing similar predatory practices. On a bright September morning, exactly 1 year after Letitia's death, Jamal Washington, now 8 years old, stood before a podium at the center's dedication ceremony. Though still quiet and serious beyond his years, the healing process had begun. He attended a new school, with supportive teachers, participated in a grief counseling program, and had recently joined a youth astronomy club, pursuing the interest his mother had encouraged. "My mama believed everybody deserves a safe home and fair treatment," Jamal told the assembled crowd, his voice small but clear. "She wasn't afraid to stand up when things were wrong, even when it was dangerous. She always told me that one person can make a difference if they're brave enough to speak the truth." The audience, community members, activists, supportive officers from the Reformed Police Department, and media from across the country, listened in respectful silence as this child whose courage had broken open a corrupt system shared his mother's legacy. "When bad things happen, we have choices," Jamal continued, reading carefully from his handwritten notes. "We can be scared and do nothing, or we can be scared but still do what's right. Mama chose to do what's right, and now we have to keep doing that too." He revealed a small plaque bearing Letitia's photograph and the words, "Truth speaks loudest when power tries to silence it." As it was installed beside the center's entrance, the crowd erupted in applause and tears. Diana Chen, who had remained involved with the case through its conclusion, leaned toward Marcus. "Remarkable young man," she observed. "Have you told him yet?" Marcus shook his head. "After the ceremony, no need to overwhelm him today." What Diana referred to was the legislation recently introduced in the State Assembly, Letitia's Law, which would create independent oversight of police departments, prohibit law enforcement coordination with private development interests, and establish protections for community organizers documenting institutional abuses. The bill had surprising bipartisan support, with even law enforcement organizations endorsing reforms to restore community trust. After the ceremony, Eloise and Jamal released butterflies in Letitia's memory, her favorite symbol of transformation and hope. Community members followed suit, creating a cloud of colorful wings rising into the clear blue sky. That evening, as Eloise tucked Jamal into bed in their rebuilt home, constructed by volunteers after the arson had destroyed the original structure, the boy asked the question that had frequently troubled his dreams. "Grandma, do you think Mama would be proud of me?" Eloise gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. "More than you could ever know, Jamal. You stood up against people so powerful they thought nobody could stop them. You told the truth when everyone tried to silence you. Because of your courage, our whole community is safer. Your Mama's work continues through you." Jamal nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I want to be a judge when I grow up," he announced. "A good one who makes sure the rules are fair for everybody, no matter if they're rich or poor or what color their skin is. I think that's a wonderful goal, Eloise replied, her eyes glistening with tears and pride. The world needs more judges. So like that. As she turned out the light, Eloise noticed something remarkable. For the first time since the shooting, Jamal hadn't asked for the hallway light to remain on. The nightmares that had plagued him for months seemed to have finally relented. Outside his window, Pinewood residents gathered for a neighborhood block party, celebrating their victory over the forces that had threatened their community. Children played freely in the streets without fear of targeted enforcement. Elders sat on porches, watching over the neighborhood as they had for generations. Young activists planned new initiatives to strengthen community connections. In homes throughout Pinewood, Letitia Washington's research materials, now digitized and distributed widely as a protection against future targeting, served as blueprints for community defense against predatory development. The systematic documentation she had created, which ultimately cost her life, now empowered residents across the city to recognize and resist similar patterns. Justice had come at an unimaginably high price. Nothing could return Jamal's mother to him or erase the trauma he had endured, but through his courage and the community's resilience, Letitia's fight had transformed from a single mother's stand against corruption into a movement for systemic change that would protect countless families for generations to come. As Jamal drifted off to sleep, a framed photograph of his mother watched over him from his bedside table, Letitia Washington smiling, full of the determination and hope that had defined her life and now lived on through her son. Her justice had finally been secured, and her legacy continued through the community she had fought to protect. This powerful story teaches us that systemic change requires extraordinary courage, especially from those society often overlooks. When 7-year-old Jamal stood against a corrupt system that had taken his mother's life, he demonstrated that truth has power regardless of who speaks it. Letitia Washington's legacy reminds us that documentation and community organizing are powerful weapons against institutional oppression. Her meticulous records ultimately exposed corruption that money and power tried desperately to hide. The story highlights how racism becomes institutionalized through connections between law enforcement, judiciary, and economic interests, creating a system designed to silence opposition and displace vulnerable communities. It shows that justice rarely comes easily or completely, requiring persistence through setbacks and strategic choices about when to compromise and when to stand firm. Perhaps most importantly, it illustrates that healing from injustice must include both accountability for wrongdoers and empowerment for affected communities. The establishment of the Community Land Trust ensures Pinewood residents not only receive justice, but gain tools to protect themselves from future exploitation, transforming victimization into lasting empowerment. What moments in this story resonated most deeply with you? Was it Jamal's courage in the courtroom, Marcus's persistence despite intimidation, or the community coming together to protect their neighborhood? Comment below with the part that moved you most and whether you've witnessed similar injustices in your own community. If this story of courage, justice, and transformation touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more powerful narratives that shine light on difficult truths. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one voice, even a child's, can spark transformative change when speaking truth against power. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Remember, in a world where systems of injustice seem overwhelming, the bravest act is often simply telling your truth, no matter how powerful those who wish to silence you may be.